Sure. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Mitigation Advisory Committee meeting. Go to the next slide. We'll talk through the agenda quickly. So the focus today is, after I give a quick project status update, talk a little bit about the schedule and the path forward. The bulk of the meeting will be focused on talking about the mitigation goals and looking at this mitigation strategy update and talking about prioritizing those actions. So a little bit on the project status. We are currently in December. As you can see from the box in the yellow at the top, we have gone through and we have a draft of the hazard idea and risk assessment that's currently in quality review. The capability assessment also being finalized, and essentially we have, this is a point at which we start working on the fun stuff, which is developing the strategies that will be informed by the risk assessment and putting all the requisite pieces of the plan together so that next month after the holidays, we can actually get a copy out to everybody and get that plan into MDEM to begin the review process, which, as you can see on this schedule, is quite accelerated in order to get the plan done and through the approval process and required revisions done and accepted by FEMA so that we can adopt the plan in March. So that's where we're at with the schedule. Things are coming together very rapidly, but on target. Next slide. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the public outreach process. You're all familiar with the public survey that we put out. We've had a total of 38 responses, which seems a little low, but it's not entirely uncommon. It seems to be random from place to place. Some places we get very few, other places we get hundreds. I think we're at a number that will be acceptable to FEMA, but there's been 38 of those. Of them, 7 have used the story map that we built to actually drop down dots on the map to show where areas of concern and so forth were. In terms of social media advertisements, we've had over 500 views and interactions on the various different social media sites that we've posted things on. So that's positive. And we're going to be closing out the survey just before the Christmas holiday and consolidating those reports so that we can inform the planning process chapter of the plan. All right, Jade.
Yes, so some of you may remember during our last committee meeting, we were able to talk a bit about what would be helpful to include in the plan and what would really help, especially with project implementation. And there was some mention of just overall capacity and capability issues. So to address that, I mentioned that we could potentially include some new information on technical assistance and kind of map and crosswalk that information within the mitigation strategy to the different projects and actions. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of what that will look like. So technical assistance is something that FEMA can provide. It's something that other federal agencies and partners, state, even in some cases, can provide. And basically what it entails is getting a stronger understanding of what the community, or in your case, county or city, what those interests and needs are, and then tailoring some support to help fill any necessary gaps. So this can help overall with project implementation, grant application development, equity goals, anything related to that. And it is supposed to be pretty tailored, so it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So some examples of how technical assistance can be used could help out with risk assessments, prioritizing projects, coming up with project alternatives, BCAs, which especially was mentioned during the last committee meeting that we had, overall training and outreach, and tracking overall progress as well. So how we're going to go about integrating this, we're going to include some mention of it where appropriate in a couple other already existing sections within the mitigation strategy, such as project prioritization as well as project implementation. And we really want to try and detail where technical assistance could be used for specific projects and actions. And we'll also be creating a new technical assistance overview section that will explain what it is, provide examples, talk about existing opportunities for that, and giving a process for how to actually get this assistance. And I believe that's the last slide on this, but I just wanted to give a quick update since we had talked about it last time that we are moving forward with this. So it's something exciting you can look forward to in the new updated mitigation strategy.
Yeah, that's brand new for this go around of plans. That's been something that hasn't been available on a structured basis from FEMA in the past, and with all these grants out there and all the money that's floating around, it's really nice timing to have that ability to ask for that assistance. And talk next. Go ahead, Jade.
Oh, I was just going to walk briefly just through the mitigation goals before we move on to talking about action prioritization. So just wanted to recap on the goals again. These were shown to the committee last time we met, and these were just the broad overarching goals that kind of encompass the breadth of types of activities and projects that can be put into the mitigation strategy. So we have focused on actual more like structural projects at the top. We have another one that focuses on improving capabilities and addressing capacity considerations. The third one here is focused on the public, so increasing awareness, education, outreach, making sure that everyone is taking advantage of opportunities as they come up. And then the final one is our more forward-looking goal that helps to address more of the climate-related concerns, and this is where the ordinances and policies and planning and all of those pieces come together. So we kept these broad. I heard your feedback from last time, and I had a couple folks reach out to me to share additional feedback, and it seemed like you wanted to keep these rather broad, match the individual actions to them, and as opposed to getting more specific with very detailed objectives. So I think this will be beneficial. All the actions will be connected to them, but it allows you the flexibility that everyone was mentioning.
All right. We'll talk a little bit about prioritizing the actions. There's an approach that those of you who've participated in previous plan updates are probably familiar with, but I'll just go through it quickly. It's called the Staple E. It can be used as an evaluation of the projects as well as a way to prioritize them. So it just looks at a project through a variety of different lenses. But the first one is social. Is the project socially acceptable to the community? Is it something that residents want? Does it cause equity problems or treat anybody unfairly? What will be the social issues and how will it benefit the community in general? Technical, will it actually work? Will it solve the problem? Does it provide only for a symptom? Is it, can it actually be engineered or built if it's a construction related project? Those type of considerations. Administration, does the community have the capacity to implement it? Do you have the right technical staff? Will you need a consultant? Can you meet all the grant, management requirements, those types of things? It's more of a capabilities issue. Politics, obviously, is it politically acceptable? Are the elected officials going to embrace the project? Are there any pitfalls to look out for in that regard? And then legal, are you authorized to do the action? Are there any potential liabilities? Things of that nature. Will it be challenged by anybody? And if it is, can you defend it is it defensible? And then economic, will it pass a benefit cost analysis? Is it, will you be saving more than $1 for every dollar that you spend, which is a requirement of the grant programs, but it's also just prudent fiscal analysis. Again, when you consider factors like maintenance into the future, how do those play into the cost effectiveness of the immediate short-term costs of the project? What burden will the action place on the tax roll or the grand list, the local economy? Will it benefit it? Will it detract from it? Things of that nature. And will it have other multiple benefits, like, does it sync with the capital improvement plan, et cetera? And then lastly, environmental. And this one is pretty much, can you get permits to do the work? Is the question here. And Ronald had a question.
Yes, Scott, I'm sorry. So
No worries.
what is staple E prioritization? Again, is that an acronym for something? Or
Yeah,
what is it?
Yeah, it's the things we just went through. It's social, technical, administrative, political, legal, economic, and environmental.
Okay.
So that's the acronym.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we move on?
This is Joey. I have one quick question.
Sure.
In terms of legal, do we take into account new regulations, new laws, and new standards that come into play?
Yeah, I mean, we'll identify projects and we'll evaluate and prioritize them, but conditions change. So when it's time to actually implement the project, you want to make sure that it's complying with whatever programs and rules and regulations and laws exist at that time. And none of these either, like when we go through this exercise, none of these are a real deep dive. You'll do that more of a deep dive when you go to administer, actually do the project. This is sort of like things, it's an organized way to think through it and identify potential areas of concern. So, we don't need to evaluate them against every bullet. It's more of a gut check on most of these things. We do it pretty quickly. We keep these things in mind as we think about a project and say, like, this project may look great in every other way, but it's not going to get political support because we're about to have an administrative change. And, so it could be an otherwise perfect project, but one of these things could throw it off, or it could be the greatest project out there, but if you can't get environmental permits for it, it's not going to work. So it's just a way to keep those things in mind as we look at the projects.
All right. So the next section, I just wanted to quickly go over some feedback that we've received in the survey so far. These have helped inform some of the new actions and projects that we'll be getting to in a minute, new suggested actions and projects. So just wanted to give a bit of background. So one of the questions asked, what hazards have had the biggest impact on the county? And you can see here, so definitely flooding and winds, as people on this committee would have guessed and have already mentioned previously, but that did sync up with what we were seeing the respondents to the survey say as well. And we did see extreme heat start creeping up there as well. So that is one of the concerns on the public's mind. Some top projects here. So definitely localized flood risk reduction, which is definitely a popular one across the board, I think, with all the communities that we work with. We also have technical assistance here, which was good to see, since we are integrating that as a new section into the mitigation strategy, outreach and education with the public, and then some enforcement of regulations, ordinances, things like that. And this is just direct community feedback. So these are comments that we received in the survey. There were quite a few on requesting updates to stormwater systems or retrofitting stormwater drainage, things like that. It's definitely, I think pluvial flooding was a top concern that we saw from the survey. There was also quite a few mentions of issues with like doing regular maintenance around tree limbs and tree trimming, and how when that's not done when there are high winds, there are some power outage impacts seen from that. So that was highlighted here as well. Oops, should we just set our message? Yeah, 38 people so far have responded to the survey. Let's see. There was a couple mentions as well about specifically helping vulnerable populations and communities and making things easier for them. Flood mitigation project along the Collington Branch stream. Risk assessments for every community. Another one about the trimming the trees. Open space, there were a few that were mentioning the need to expand and prioritize acquiring open space and maintaining that open space. And there was a suggestion as well about considering some ordinance changes related to that. But I would say overall, the top issues were definitely stormwater management, issues around high winds and power outages, and more than I was expecting around the tree trimming and management there. Any questions or comments on this before we move on to the next section?
Did we get more comments from one general area of the county, or was it widespread?
It was fairly widespread. We did have, there was like a cluster around the Collington Branch stream, definitely around that area. And then the other ones were fairly spread out, I think similar to the map that we showed in the beginning where people were kind of putting dots on the map to highlight some hazard problem areas. But yeah, I would say overall there was a couple cluster areas, but it was fairly spread out.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have made it to the mitigation strategy portion. We can go through some of the proposed actions and projects. So let me switch my screen that I'm sharing. Okay. So what we have here, this is just put together in an Airtable. If you haven't used it before, kind of similar look to an Excel workbook.
Is there any way to zoom in on that a little more? Too?
Great question.
I'm just on a small screen. Maybe people can see it better.
No problem. How's that? Is that any better?
It's a little better. Yeah.
Okay. Let me know if anybody else can't see it. I can continue to zoom in. But here, so I've just brought over the actions from the previous plan that we can go through first. And then after that, we have some new suggested actions that were pulled from reviewing the risk assessment, the capability assessment, as well as the outreach materials, so the survey and the community mapping portion of the story map. So the process here will be just going one by one. There's been some, we went and put some like preliminary suggestions here for either changes or what to remove to make way for some updated actions, but ultimately it is up to you guys on the committee to determine what you want to do. So, you know, don't let my or our team's initial recommendation stop you if you feel strongly about something. For the action status here, what we have, so you can carry the action over, which means it was in the previous plan and we want to bring it into the updated plan. We can carry it over and modify it, so change some of the wording, change details. We can remove it from this updated plan completely, and then once we get through reviewing these older actions, you'll see we have the new ones and some that we've pulled from plans, other plans within the jurisdiction.
And I'll just add a little bit of emphasis. FEMA, we used to, when we did these plans, kind of have the philosophy of let's throw everything in there to be as comprehensive as we can. And so there's a lot of continue to do what we're already doing, like, for example, continue to enforce the floodplain management ordinance or regulations. And FEMA's push now is like on those things, if it's something you routinely do and it's a good thing, it should be in the capability assessment, not necessarily as a strategy. They're looking for more slightly smaller list of more meaningful, measurable actions that treating it a bit more like a 5-year strategic plan that it's supposed to be, and taking some of the older things like that out. So just throw that out there for consideration as we go through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you'll see for those ones that we've identified, I've put the word capability in the notes section, and I've usually either said we should modify it or have suggested that for removal. Okay, so the first one here, so this was originally working with FEMA to promote the use of flood hazard maps. I've suggested here that we could change this one to working with FEMA and the state and others to utilize available technical assistance. I thought that would be a bit of a better use, as this seemed more of a capability. And as we go through this, as I finish reading one and finish my little spiel on each action, feel free to shout out if you feel strongly, disagree. If I don't hear anything, then I'll just assume that what we have on the screen as far as the action status sounds good. And as we're going through this, you can also, if you think we should change the priority to something else, you can definitely do that as well. And after we go through this, I'll consolidate any changes, and it'll be sent out for review by the committee. So if you have follow-up considerations or comments, you can provide them then as well. All right. So if no one does anyone have any comments on this one?
This is Sanjay. So
Sure.
if we can expand it to other like partners or agencies, just not be focused on the FEMA, because there are tons of grants out there, like the EPA provides some hazard mitigation grants, or like other agencies. So kind of expand that verbiage like to the other agency, or like a wide range of stakeholders, including like the federal entities, states, or private sectors, because some of those grants or funding sources coming from different funding sources, not just the FEMA or like the state. So it's better just to expand it a little bit more.
Yeah, good point. So I just changed it here to federal agencies, the state, and NGOs, just so we can have a wide variety. So I think that's a great point. Okay, and we'll leave this one as high for now, unless anyone has disagrees with that. Okay, so this next one, moving along. So this was another partnering with FEMA one on updated flood hazard maps. This one was a bit more of a capability, so we want to move this to the capability assessment section and remove it from this strategy. And this was, oh, sorry, I don't think I explained this column here, the status update. This is providing the information that was in the 2019 Hazard Mitigation Plan status update report. So this will show the most current status as of right now, and here said it was something that was ongoing.
Yeah, so in the new plan, there'll be like essentially two tables. One will be what I call the disposition table, which just shows the status of all the 2017 actions and justification of why they're removed, carried over, or whatever. And then all the ones that carry over will go into the new action table and be added with any new ones.
This is Dawn. I'm sorry, I didn't follow the reference to the 2019. Was that 2019 plan?
I thought I said 2017, the last plan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
we'll just, FEMA requires you to show them your progress, and you know, they don't judge it. You just have to show them like this one's complete, this one didn't get done, but it no longer makes sense, so we're removing it, or this one's still important, so we're keeping it, that type of disposition. And then all the carryovers and the new stuff go into a separate table, so you're kind of starting fresh, but you have a history of your decisions.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I guess on a annual basis, we'll be able to acknowledge where we might have more updated information than the FEMA map. Okay, because we do anticipate having some new studies come online soon. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I did mention earlier that there was a 2019 report that the county put out. It's kind of like a status update on the progress of the previous plan. So that, that's available on the county website, and it provided basically like, how's the plan going? Are we doing projects? What are the status of all these? And that's where this information was pulled from over here.
So that was probably something we did for the CRS, or
yes.
Yeah. Okay, I got it.
I'm sorry, I missed that piece. That's why I answered the way I did.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was like, oh, what did we do in 2019?
Okay. So this next one, focusing on using the revised flood maps. Let's see. And focusing on some facilities that could have some hazardous materials, and making sure everyone is aware of how to properly use those in response to any hazard risk, and any protection measures that they could take. I thought this one was a good action here. You had a high priority last time. I thought it was best to leave this one in here. And in response to your comment about having some updated mapping and studies come online, we can always change this one to be a little bit broader, not just like revised FEMA flood maps, but just general, like the best available data that the city has for these hazards.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, especially if you develop any stormwater or pluvial hazard flooding maps, that would be very beneficial to add.
That's right. Thanks.
This next one down here. So this is all about plan integration, which FEMA definitely likes to see. So I'm glad you guys had this one in here. We recommended that you carry this one over as is, and we just had a suggestion that this might be a good one to have as a high priority to really make sure that you're integrating these actions across all plans.
Yeah, I think it should be high too, considering we have so many plans in progress, right? Especially the climate action plan.
Yes,
there's a number of flood requirements.
Okay, this next one, collecting flood depth information to support getting some elevation certificates, ultimately to support letter of map amendments and premium reductions for the NFIP. This one, we said you could carry this over. I did want to mention before, you said there's limited staff capacity here, and you were going to be bringing on people to do this. I didn't know if that happened or if this was still a priority. But if it wasn't prioritized last time, I suggested maybe lowering it to medium, but I wanted to hear overall thoughts.
Yeah, so since the 2017 plan, we've added 2 new staff to our flood management group, which has helped us tremendously in terms of the workload. I don't foresee the need for any additional staff at this point. But as more responsibilities come our way from other areas, that need might arise. But at this point, I think we could move it to medium, because we're managing pretty well now what's on our plate. I do have a question regarding the elevation certificates. Are those being phased out, or would anyone know if they're being phased out with the changes to, is that risk map 2.0?
Risk rating 2.0. It's a good question. I'm not sure I have the 100% correct answer. I don't think they're being phased out because they still have value for regulatory purposes. With risk rating 2.0, they're going to be looking at a number of other criteria to set rates, like distance to the water. So it's not just depth anymore. Well, they're going to be looking at the depth of flooding. So, for example, the whole floodplain is not equal. If you're 10 feet away from the river versus way out on the fringe of the floodplain, the depth is greater, closer to the river. So they'll be looking at things like that. I forget a lot of the other parameters, but the short answer to your question is the elevation certificate will get slightly less important in setting premiums. I don't think they're going to eliminate it.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so I mean, to that end, I knew it was something about the significance of the broader need for elevation certificates might not be as great as it was in the past. So I think that's further reason to reduce priority to medium. So I'm fine with the medium priority.
Okay, and we might just with bringing up that point, it might be good. So here it's highlighting to get these elevation certificates for areas that have recently become a part of the special flood hazard area. I know elevation certificates can be helpful also for structures or properties that are experiencing repeated flooding that are actually outside of the special flood hazard area, because you can get away with avoiding some having to do a BCA if you can get an elevation certificate to show that you kind of meet the mark with the property's elevation in relation to the base flood elevation. So it could also be helpful outside of the special flood hazard area. So you might want to consider expanding that language a little bit to maybe just properties that are just experiencing flooding issues.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, this next one here, so this was coordinating the building code and floodplain ordinance whenever either is updated. This seemed more of a capability of interagency coordination, so we suggested to remove this one. Any objection here? Oh, okay. Let's see, we'll open up this one. So this is our very common action that we'll see put in hazard mitigation plans that was actually recommended by FEMA at one point, and it kind of covers the issue of, you know, we're planning here, we're trying our best to envision what you guys are going to want, what projects you guys are going to want to do in the future, but we're not going to be perfect with that. So this covers a lot of different types of projects, so you can still say that the hazard mitigation plan supports it. I will say it's kind of hit or miss now with the regions, whether they want to see a project like this. Sometimes they like to see this type of thing broken up into multiple actions, but you had this one in the plan before, covers a lot of different types of projects which can help with grants. So I've recommended to keep this in and basically see if that's something that that FEMA and the state would like to see in here still, since it is pretty common.
We call it the kitchen sink strategy. So all the grants are tied. When you apply for any of the FEMA grants, at least they look back to the plan to see if you address that type of project in the plan. So this doesn't necessarily mean you're going to want to do every single one of those, but they're in there in case you do.
Yeah, so that is a very comprehensive listing there. One of the items I see, Jane, is where it says protection of public or private property from natural hazards. A lot a good percentage of what we fund in our budgets, because I see there's a reference to FY20 stormwater management CIP budget in the other status column, but they're not always natural hazards. Some of this is, in urban areas that are really man-made, man's use of the land, the communities, roadways, drainage issues that come up that maybe are long-standing issues, because of infrastructure upgrades that need to be done to be more in alignment with current code, stormwater code, stormwater and storm drain code. So could that natural hazards be expanded to kind of talk about the reality of working in an urban area? It's just a question. I could talk further with Dawn offline at some point, because this is really a big, I understand Scott's comment that this covers anything that you might apply for in a grant, that you have it in your plan to support that. But it's a big comprehensive list. And in our CIP currently, we don't do much with relocation of structures, retrofitting of existing buildings, etc.
Yeah, I think all the urban stormwater related things that you mentioned in FEMA's mind would fall under a natural hazard, because they're all related to precipitation and rain induced flooding. I'm sure there's some exceptions to that. This plan focuses on natural hazards. I don't have a problem removing the word natural from it.
I wasn't Scott, I wasn't suggesting moving natural, but maybe expanding it. But I also understand that you're saying urban areas would fall under items, 1 through 11, so I'm okay with it. This first, I've focused on the statement, and it's much more than what we do in our CIP, which is covered over in the other column there, which green highlights right now.
Okay.
Am I out of line, Dawn? Do I?
No, I mean, I think you're fine. I mean, if you want to talk about if you want to work on maybe editing the text to better reflect how we want to present.
The CIP, particularly with reference to the budget right now. I don't know, like it says the approved FY20 stormwater budget will that be updated to, right now we're working on our 24 budget, but our latest approved budget is FY23.
But I guess this is something that we could update on an annual basis, right? Or is this our baseline?
Yeah, you can always update it. The reference to FY20 in the highlighted text to the right that's the statement that was included in your 2019 status update. So that's why it says 2020 is not part of this recommendation.
Yeah.
I would say definitely play around with the wording and shoot it back to us. The only caution I advise is a lot of the things you talked about that are in the CIP are probably related to maintenance, and FEMA will not fund maintenance. However, this plan is not just limited to FEMA grants. So if it's important to you, it doesn't have to perfectly match the plan. It should be in there to gain support, for other programs and so on. But just be a little shy about putting maintenance stuff in there.
No, I agree with that. And in fact, a lot of what we do in our CIP now, our agency, DOE, I'm talking to, not so much our sister agency, Public Works, but a lot of what we do is retrofits and not really, and it is new infrastructure in many cases, or most cases it's new, unless it would be something with an existing stormwater facility, it would be a retrofit of current capacity. And that gets us into high hazard dams and all the other things of that. But most of what we do under our CIP is new infrastructure being constructed, you know, to bring things closer to code and to, you know, so I'd like to just maybe talk more with Dawn offline, you know, not looking at a wholesale change, but just to see if there's some tweaks.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine, Frank.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So this next one, promote appropriate mitigation measures for hazard, vulnerable, priority, critical facilities. It's kind of a broad one that just covers critical facilities in general. So we suggested to carry this over and just modify just to strengthen the language a little bit from just generally promote to implement.
Excuse me, Jade, before
Yes.
moving on, just if you don't mind, go back to the previous one. So,
Sure.
just kind of like what you mentioned, I think it's better to keep that explanation broad. So, because we don't know what type of project we're going to do in the future, and also if you can add also acquisition in that type of like project would be also helpful, because sometimes we need to do the acquisition, and there are some other projects for hazard mitigation we may do some acquisition, so it's good to keep it broad. And also kind of like so because we need to keep the natural hazard in the plan based on the Code of Federal Regulation 2011.1. So it's the federal requirements to keep it, like mentioned, like doing the higher or hazard identification and risk assessment based on the natural hazard. So I think we need to keep it in the plan, that verbiage. So and also keep that explanation broad to, I mean, in the future we may do different type of projects, and it's not expected really what we're going to do. We do have our Department of Environment may have some other like projects or like some specific budget for critical infrastructures or renovating or conducting new project. But for hazard mitigation project, I think it should be broad, because local municipalities or maybe private sectors may want to do some specific projects, and when we don't include it in this explanation, we may miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
maybe, son, and maybe the status would say that this is not only in the stormwater management budget, but other budgets or other capital projects by municipalities, etc.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. We can expand that one. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there is no problem with that one. So I'm saying it's good to expand it as much as we can. You can add, for example, like whatever you want to add to that explanation, but do not remove those that we have already put in the plan, because we may conduct some specific projects in the future. And when we don't put it in the plan, requesting for grant money would be a little bit harder.
Right. No, I agree. I understand.
yeah, this status update column, just to clarify, this is just more for our reference while we're reviewing these current actions. So this 2019 status update won't be in the updated plan. It'll be replaced with how Scott was mentioning, like our action disposition table, saying if we're carrying them over, and just in general, like, did we complete this? Did we not? What's the overall very brief status? So this is more just for reference as we're deciding whether to carry something over or not here.
And I think that Asan made a really good point about the action being broad. When he mentioned acquisition, I thought, oh, it's already there, but it does speak to flood-prone structures. And I know that in the past, we've had to acquire structures for other emergency management reasons. So maybe we could just say acquisition of structures. I don't know, endangered structures or something to that effect.
Hazard prone, maybe, instead of flood prone.
Yeah. We actually have a program. We have a budget item that is called endangered structures. Dawn, you're correct. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, all good points. Okay. This next one, this was the broader one that's just covering mitigation actions for critical facilities, strengthening to language here to implement, but overall keeping this mostly the same. So if no one has,
This is Joey. I'm okay with keeping this, but I'm just out of curiosity, why did we hash out hazardous or hazmat facilities early on, and then we sort of break up critical infrastructure facilities here? Aren't they one and the same?
So yes, I think the other one was meant to get more at the emergency aspect here, and I think it's because for some CRS requirements for the planning process, they have certain categories that they want to see you hit for what you're considering. So there are these categories here, and emergency services is one of them. And
Okay.
I think it was getting more at the emergency service and like preparedness aspect, and this one is more broadly critical facilities, but also specifically mitigation.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no.
To follow up with Joy's question, would it be different from preparedness and emergency services? You lump them both together.
Yeah, I mean, you can differentiate them somewhat. So we have, like I said, preparedness before. We have like prevention here, which this one's actually considering more like ordinances and policies and things like that. So you can differentiate them if you would like. I think emergency services, it was used in the plan more broadly to also include kind of preparedness actions, just to differentiate from like mitigation focused things. But that's something we could break apart if you would find that useful.
I clearly leave that to Joy and his team.
Yeah, definitely something to think about. You don't have to give an answer now. You can, whenever you get a chance to review this, you can provide an answer then. It's easy enough for us to just recategorize any as needed. But definitely something to keep in mind. Here, okay, so this one's focusing on the Upper Marlboro Emergency Response Plan to address flooding and a couple of these other elements. This was kind of a more specific action that was very similar to the action we already talked about before that was just general plan integration. So I thought it was repetitive, and we suggested that this one be removed. But if anybody disagrees and you would like to keep this specific one in here, we can do that as well.
Yeah, so is everyone familiar with that emergency response plan I guess I'm speaking to OHS. We prepared this emergency response plan back in 1999. It is really, really outdated. So I think that this is something that we definitely need to do because we don't have any replacement for it yet. Right. So I think in many ways, some of the new systems that we've developed over the years, like the Everbridge and Alert Prince George's, that kind of gets us close to what we need in terms of a plan for Upper Marlboro, but it doesn't really replace that effective current plan. So I would recommend keeping it in there because I think we definitely need to update it. And it can remain as medium, but I think it's something that should be done.
Dawn, are we talking about the incorporated or incorporated part of Upper Marlboro?
It covers both parts. So that emergency operation plan covers the downtown area and a little bit outside of it, outside of the downtown area.
Thank
The
you.
incorporated area. Yeah.
Okay, so I changed this one to keeping it in the plan. I think that sounds like what everybody was going for.
Don, there's Don, this is Frank again. There's a couple components. I don't know where they fit into the strategy here, but State Highway is finalizing design on Water Street, which is supposed to elevate the roadway down behind the courthouse from the current condition. And then DOE completed a CIP that hasn't been implemented yet with the Corps of Engineers, and that is with DPW&T to implement, and that is an impact or a benefit from that is supposed to reduce some of the flood elevations, in certain areas. So
Yeah.
that might be part of a new strategy or an update to this strategy
for the response plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Those projects will inform what those new thresholds are, where the new flood-prone structures are. But the town of Upper Marlboro is still quite vulnerable to extensive flooding during major events, and that's why we created that response plan. So even with the new projects that will go in place, quite a bit of that downtown area and areas outside the downtown area will be impacted. So we'll definitely take into account your new modeling results as a result of these projects or impacts of these projects when that emergency response plan is updated.
All right. So if there's no more comments relating to that one, we can move on to the next one. So this one is focused on outreach and education, specifically towards high-risk properties in the special flood hazard area. So this one, we suggested to carry it over and modify just a bit of the language, and specifically including this last sentence about prioritizing outreach when there's new or upcoming funding opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And I know we're supposed to do outreach to residents outside of those high hazard areas, but I think the priority or the need is highest for those properties in a special flood hazard area. So I think we're good as is.
Okay, and there are some other actions. I think they're some of the newer ones that we were recommending that are also broader and are just generally to everyone in the county.
All right.
So that'll address that. So this one here focuses on implementing best management practices and low impact development practices to meet some water quality requirements. And then it gets a little bit more specific there. We recommended to carry over and modify, and I just wanted to pull this here in the county's plan 2035. You have this strategy here. So if you feel like this is appropriate as well, we could always change it to this one to better reflect and integrate the two plans, or we could, keep this one and just make a mention of this as well, depending on your preference.
Don, do we want to keep that priority as high, or do you want to drop it down to medium?
Yeah, that I don't know. Frank, any thoughts about this one?
Well, it's part of our, our next it's part of our current permit and our next permit with the state of Maryland. So
yeah,
much of the county's, much of our budget is relative to this. So I think it would stay high. Not to dismiss the comment that was just made, but it is one of the two major missions, at least of DOE, flood mitigation and water quality.
Mhm.
So I think it would, for that reason alone, it would stay as a high strategy, mitigation strategy.
Mhm. Because it's mandated too.
It's also, yeah, it's mandated by the MS4 permit.
Right.
Yeah.
And our, yeah, you're right, our budget, significant amount of budget goes towards that. So,
Yeah, we can provide, Jade, we could provide more verbiage on that as needed. Obviously, every entity, every municipality has that permit. So,
Gotcha.
I think it would stay high.
All right. That sounds good. So I just made a note here, and yeah, we can definitely work on the exact language later on. So this next one was focusing on a 2016 water quality assessment that was done. So we suggested it for removal unless there's an updated assessment or some other consideration that you would like to make an edit and keep this one in here.
So Dawn, Jerry's group does watershed implementation plans, which are done, also mandated by the MS4 permit. And those plans are done by outside consultant. It could be Henson Creek, it could be Western Branch, etc. So I don't know if that's an update to the Park and Planning 2016 study, but I think it would, at least because again, it's part of a mandated permit that we do the evaluations of watershed impairments is the way it's put. So I think we would at least stay as a medium.
yeah, I just don't know if the action should be based on the Park and Planning 2016 water quality biological assessment studies.
I think it may be more the county's the WIP, the watershed implementation plan.
Right. So maybe, yeah.
Gotcha. Just make that language change.
Yeah. And we could pull data out of the current permit, Jade, to, I'm sorry, not data, but we could verbiage if we need to provide more input. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would definitely be helpful.
Okay.
Okay, this next one here was focusing on levee improvements. So working with USACE to pursue funding to implement the improvement work. And then it gets a little bit more specific with exact levies and O&M plans. Is this something you would like to keep in here, and is high still a good priority for it?
We're almost done, right, Frank? Allison Street's almost done. That's the last.
Well, Ellison Street is substantially complete. That's Ellison Street levee, which has got. Is that all that refers to?
Yeah, it says 4 of the 5 have been FEMA accredited. Complete accreditation of Arundel Street levee system is one of the actions. And maintain accreditation through O&M plan implementation.
Yeah, so that's very close to being accredited again. I mean, we're planning in this next calendar year to complete that work with FEMA, with MDE, because it's also classified as a high hazard dam. The levee is considered a dam structure as well. So I think we could wordsmith that a bit to show that there's been good progress on this strategy, that.
Is this something that you guys would, do regularly and have upkeep on this? Like, is this more of a capability that should be in the capability assessment rather than a specific goal?
Maybe it should be capability.
Yeah.
Maintain O&M plan.
Yeah.
Because we'll need to provide an update on this so we can, make sure it's clear the progress you guys have made on this in the strategy disposition table, but it sounds like it's a good fit for the capability assessment.
Okay.
Okay, here, so this is updating the flood warning system notification list with those kind of priority properties. This one also sounded like a capability to me. So we suggested it be removed.
That's the Everbridge system. I'm sorry, that was Everbright. I think I wrote Everbright early on, but it should be
yeah.
Everbridge.
Yeah.
With the list of flood prone.
I don't know. I think if you're updating it with new information, it might.
That might be ongoing, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you do it routinely and it is ongoing, then maybe it is a capability, but I could argue this one either way. I'm sorry, Jay, I don't mean to confuse things.
That's okay.
Yeah, so for from a emergency management perspective, I guess that would be a high priority for your team to ensure that we have a current list of those properties that are flood prone, right? So maybe that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that qualifies as capability, or I don't know which one it qualifies as.
Well, I think it qualifies as capability, that in terms of having the capability to make those notifications, which is why you have the Everbridge system highlighted there. So, I mean, I'm good with moving it to capabilities.
Okay.
Okay. Next one here, completed disaster recovery plan, family reunification plan. So this one, we suggested modifying it a bit to call out that this could include more of like a post-disaster strategic rebuild framework that so you would make some decisions in advance that if there are some buildings or an area that's substantially damaged, you could decide whether you're going to rebuild there, or if you're going to take that as an opportunity to, preserve some of that land, maybe as open space, and prioritize development elsewhere. And then we threw in that this would integrate equity considerations as well. So just wanted to hear your feedback on this.
I have some feedback. Can we add, or would people consider adding the words including temporary housing to that? I was just at a National Emergency Management Association conference, and they were talking about asking communities to include temporary housing, or having temporary housing plans, because there's a lot of challenges they have citing them, and that makes it take a long time to do. So like the emphasis was on pre-selection of potential locations, perhaps relaxing some regulations for temporary siting, things like that. This is all part of a recovery. It's part of recovery planning. But
I was going to say, Scott, wouldn't that all still fall under post-disaster strategic rebuilding discussions?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, because if you start calling out
specific
housing, yeah, you're going to end up calling out a great deal of recovery strategies.
Good point.
So I think that's sort of a catch-all. Everything from, post-disaster housing to feeding to sheltering to, forward-leaning, looking at, where we would have mass shelters at, those type of things.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's a broad thing. No sense, I guess, in pulling one piece out.
So for this one, are we okay with the wording here and the maintaining the priority as high?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. Okay. all the text. So this one is working with the Agency on Aging and their outreach specifically to senior citizens during periods of extreme heat and extreme cold. And here we just provided that kind of just for consideration that you could extend the community emergency response team and citizen corps and kind of utilize that as like a buddy program to provide like extra outreach to vulnerable populations before and after hazard events if you wanted to extend this a bit, or you could maintain it as is.
I actually think this should, and I know this focuses on seniors, but I think it should be broader and focused on vulnerable populations, which encompasses seniors, which encompasses those with access and functional needs, so forth.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Joy because like seniors should be included in access and functional needs. So it's a broad term, so we can use it like, for example, people with disabilities and others with access and functional needs, and vulnerable populations.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Which could also be social vulnerabilities or economic.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, great. So we can make that wording change here. So are you saying you want to keep this one as is and just make that wording change from senior citizens to vulnerable populations and not include this extra piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think including the extra piece, yeah, CERT would definitely be a, one mechanism for us serving that population. Medical Reserve Corps could be another component. County volunteers, county employees who volunteer could also be another. So, similar to the strategy before, I wouldn't want to just call out one particular area.
Gotcha. All right, that makes sense. We will make that wording change then. Okay, here, so supporting regional drought response planning and then continue the county's commitment to participating. This signified by the words continue here, it sounded more of a capability. It's something that you guys do on an ongoing basis. So we recommended removing and including that in the capability assessment. If there are no objections, I will assume that is okay. Okay, moving on to the next one, continue participation in community and neighborhood events to promote hazard awareness and mitigation options. This one did also seem more like a capability and we suggested removal. And this one, and similar to the one beneath it, were kind of replaced or suggested to be replaced by some other updated outreach and education actions that we have further down below. So we would mention both of these in the capability assessment, remove them here, and replace them with some of the more updated outreach ones below.
Yeah, as long as that's covered in it in a different strategy when it comes to outreach. I think Don discussed earlier on in terms of us doing more outreach in those flood prone areas.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And they're broad enough too, so they cover everyone. So we're not just getting too specific and calling out specific neighborhoods or anything like that. Okay. And of course, when we send this out, if you see the other ones, you decide they're terrible and you do not want them at all, we can always change this and say, we'll keep these ones in instead.
Okay.
So this next one here, work with municipalities to provide hazard awareness messaging and information on storm preparedness and mitigation. And then it listed some different mediums here. This one, we just wanted to call out during the last meeting. We had some people mention that, especially doing outreach in secondary languages was a priority, as well as we suggested updating this to also include social media to gather a bit of the action before this in here as well. So we just made this this change. Wanted to hear if that sounds okay and if this would still be a high priority.
I think it's good, but I think we can add also, for example, with expanding partnership like public-private partnership, because I know some like higher education institutions, they do the same working with our municipalities, like University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center. So I think it could be good to expand to like public-private partnership, add the public-private partnership for outreach activity, aside from just focus on like the public outreach activity, which is like the government agencies.
Right. Okay, so I just added that here, so it'd be municipalities and or develop public-private partnerships. Does that sound okay? Does that capture what you were saying?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Okay, great. So the last one of the old actions here, this one was focusing on distributing a citizens preparedness guide and business preparedness guide at community events and incorporating hazard mitigation elements into it. This one, some suggested revisions would be just specifically honing in on that you'd want to mention how these basically focus on implementation, how these projects could get included in a grant application, how they could get funding, you know, giving people some actionable steps when you do integrate this information.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay. All right. And I believe, yeah, I think for the city of Laurel, we'll skip over these ones for now, and we can follow up because I believe Christina had to drop off. So
You did.
yeah, okay. So I will follow up with her on those and other folks from the city as needed. So with a little bit of time we have left, so let's see, action status. I just wanted to introduce a few of the new actions that we have here, specifically the ones that are, let's see, from the outreach work that was done. And we won't have time to get through them all, so I can send them out as a follow-up, and I can even put it in if it's easier to do kind of like a survey monkey situation, so we can have folks like rank them or provide any comments. We can do that if that would be easiest, but I wanted to get through some of these, the ones that came from the public here. So I mentioned before there was a lot of, or quite a few comments referring to coordinating with PEPCO and doing tree trimming and just some general concern with old growth trees specifically during hazard events and the risk that they can propose. But of course, it's, you know, balancing the risk there with also the benefit of having those old growth trees with those large canopies that can help with extreme heat mitigation. So kind of developed out this strategy that could address all of that together. And then this comment section, I know it's kind of cut off right now, but it just includes some specific comments from the public survey that it was reacting to. So this is an action that we can consider. You don't have to give a response now if you wouldn't like to. You can do that in the follow-up, but someone has a strong opinion either way, feel free to shout it out.
I think PEPCO has a vegetation management plan in turn, but I mean, I can't speak on how they implement it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if they're on. I think there was someone from PEPCO that's on the committee. I don't know if they're on now. But this would be, I guess, just more about coordination to try and address this issue. So I guess like working with PEPCO to try and make sure that some of these neighborhoods that seems like from the comments there was kind of specific neighborhoods where they were having these repeated issues. Just be making sure that, you know, like working on their behalf to try and get that addressed. But I'll leave this here for now for you to consider, and you can decide. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Does anyone know if we have like a liaison with the utilities on maintenance matters? This is a question to agency personnel on the call. I don't know that we do.
Not for, I mean, we don't for maintenance. I mean, we have them for emergency management functions, but not necessarily for maintenance.
Okay. All right.
Don, we do for WSSC, but not for PEPCO that I know of. But we do have customer service people that we coordinate with on a regular basis that are WSSC.
Typically, the utility programs, tree trimming programs, are very narrowly focused on just their lines, so they don't even do a lot of the connector lines, or, you know, this may be a broader concern with these people that are maybe concerned about, well, trees falling on their houses and cars and things in addition to utilities, or if we see strategies where tree trimming around critical facilities sometimes falls on the county instead of the utilities. So just throwing that out there for consideration.
Okay.
Yeah, there were a couple people in the survey that did mention specifically the threat of trees not only falling on power lines, but they were worried it was going to like fall on their house during a high wind event. So they wanted to get rid of the tree entirely.
And this is Mary Sherrill from Storm Drain Maintenance. We do get into a lot of back and forth about this issue because a lot of times if the trees are tangled in the wires, we tell the residents we can't do much for them because we can't touch the wires, and PEPCO says that they don't do tree maintenance. And that truly, if it's near a storm drain, it's ours. So this is a problem in terms of the back and forth. So I'm not surprised that residents have brought it up, because I know of a few specific residents who have been frustrated by this.
So would an action be to establish some type of liaisonship with the utility to address these common complaints, I guess, maybe. And I don't know if that's a possibility, but I guess it could be a worthwhile action to pursue.
Or
John, I think it
mutual.
could.
Go ahead.
Not only that, but if we had just clear guidelines as to what truly is the responsibility of the county versus what will the utility company take action on, especially PEPCO.
Okay, yeah. That could
I think one of the action done could be like having a mutual aid agreement or like MOA, just in general, to define the responsibilities of private sectors and also the county agencies in case of any emergency.
All right, so I'll include some of these notes when I share this out, so you guys can, you know, feel free to workshop and suggest some language edits here. We'll leave that one there for now. Let's see, the few minutes we have left. This one would be conducting a floodplain and stream restoration project or another project as appropriate for the Collington Branch stream that mitigates the high 100-year flood expected losses as determined by Hazard MH in the risk assessment chapter. You know, we can also take out this last piece, but it was in the risk assessment, it's like very apparent where this little area is on the map. So I included it there for now. But we did have a couple people or a number of people reach out on the public survey as well as in the hazard mapping highlighting this area and ongoing issues there.
And that area is the, I guess it's confluence right at Upper Marlboro, Western Branch and Upper Marlboro. So I think a recommendation here would be to, conduct a watershed study for Collington Branch and identify mitigation measures to reduce flood risk. And that type of study is in the process of being scoped already. So, I think it
Great.
will get to that point. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, that is good to hear. See, so I can make that change, so it's something that you can include if you're already scoping that and looking into doing that type of work. We can include it in here, and that way it'll be highlighted the next go around as something that was completed. Let's see, so this is one of the outreach ones. This is one of the specific outreach ones that we put in here in relation to someone's comment. It was Founders Terrace, which looks like kind of a very distinct road. And there were some homeowners, I think, complaining because there's a stream that runs behind homes, and I guess they had some flooding issues. I'm not sure if you're aware of this specific area or not. But
Founders, I see it's in Fort Washington. I just don't know where Founders Terrace is. There are a number of projects at various stages of development in Fort Washington.
Okay. Yeah, I can leave this in here, and
you can leave it in there so we can figure out where exactly it is.
This one, so during the last meeting, we had some folks specifically mention microgrids. So this one would be focusing on grid modernization and exploring adding a solar microgrid. And I think this would also help reduce with some of the power outage complaints that we saw in the community survey. So we have this one, and this is also something that would be covered by FEMA's hazard mitigation assistance grants as well.
So exploration of microgrids is included in that climate action plan. So in some way, shape, or form, I guess, as we move through the climate implementation strategic plan, it will somehow address microgrids. How it will address it, I'm uncertain at this point because the task force has not yet started developing their actual focus of strategies or prioritizing what will happen. But I would say that microgrids are part of that resiliency focus in the climate action plan. So
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I would
for modernization, I don't know.
I would suggest then leaving this in here or including something similar to this that mentions microgrids just in general, because then, if you do decide to include one or, do a project that involves one, then you could have access potentially to that hazard mitigation assistance funding. If you're calling it out in here, so we can make sure this is broad since, it seems a little up in the air. And yeah, we will highlight to FEMA that that's also included in the climate action plan because they always like to see that. I'll go over this next one, and then I'll just leave time if there's any additional comments or any other projects people want to throw out there. And then I will kind of discuss next steps briefly. So this one, there was some talk about potentially developing a hazard mitigation hub website that's similar. Someone had found this website. This was Vision Zero here. And this we saw in the Plan 2035 that there was also an action or step to develop a climate resilience website. So my suggestion would be to integrate those as much as possible. So that's why I included that here, but we definitely wanted to call this out. I think that would be a great great way to do some outreach and provide like a central location where folks can go to get some actionable steps to do some of these projects.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just give a brief overview of steps and then ask for any feedback here. So next steps, there are a few other, so we were like 4 or 5 away. We were close with the new ones. Some other ones that we pulled out or we wanted to suggest for inclusion, and these are not something that you have to go through and wholesale and include as many as you can. You can it's whatever you guys want, so no pressure there. And then I'll include in the list, so these are actions that were specifically pulled from other plans. So this would be help with some plan integration work. So I've made note of the plans that they come from, Sleep Plan 2035 and the Climate Action Plan. So you have those to look through, and then there's some down here that it seems like would be useful for both the city and the county to consider for inclusion. So we have those, and then I'll follow up with the City of Laurel separately on getting kind of the disposition or status update on the actions from the previous plan here. So essentially, I will be following up with this list in an easy to navigate format, potentially in a survey, so you can give easy feedback as a group. If anyone feels like they want to have like a separate meeting with me to talk through some of these, or a smaller group, that is totally fine. I'm open to that as well. Just let me know. But before we close out here, were there any other projects that were on anyone's mind in the committee that they wanted to kind of throw out there for consideration that I can add to this list before I send it out to everyone? And I will note that I tried to include also on this source column on the side here, if there was something that was mentioned during our last committee meeting, I tried to write that up into a mitigation action and throw that in here as well. So there was, I think a couple of these ones here, including, tracking metrics so that you can more easily communicate progress to the public. The resilience hubs idea included that as well for you guys to look into a little bit more.
Jay, do you
yep.
see, this is Frank, I'm reading the one like on the Greenway, in the floodplains, you have something globally where Park and Planning has developed great plans in the past for their green infrastructure plan, for et cetera, which was updated like every 10 years. Mm-hmm. Are they engaged in this committee as one of the major landowners in generally in the floodplain areas? Or we could have a separate discussion with them and you, because they update their plans. They are out there for public information. They're a great resource, great graphics, all that would address questions like this, where a greenway, Stormwater Park Greenway or other watershed landscape. So, they're a major stakeholder as a property owner,
Yeah, definitely. I think when I send this out, or, if I put this kind of in a survey format to get everybody's feedback on these additional actions, we should absolutely send it to them as well. We can have a follow-up meeting if they feel like there's some significant information, or they want to have a discussion about some of these. But I think it would be a great idea if they have any upcoming like plans or projects or studies that they want to do, to include some of those in here, even in a broad way, just to access some of this funding on so they could access some of this funding. I think that would absolutely be a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, so I will make sure that they are included as well. Any other last minute projects anyone wants to shout out, or concerns if it's, not a fully fleshed out project yet?
I'll speak with our associate director. We're spending a good amount of time on, I've seen some things here with dam assessment, dam breach assessment. So let us take a look at these lines and we have new items in our budget that we actually did put into a grant application a while back, you know, that maybe should land here to be part of the county's mitigation strategy. So I just thought of that when I saw some things here on assessments and baselines and things like that, you know, so. Okay.
Yep, that sounds good. So I will go ahead and make sure that this is in a survey or some format that it's easy to give some feedback here on these. And I will send that out to everyone on the committee and, you know, encourage you, if there's anybody that's not on the committee that you feel like needs to provide input, you can share that with them as well. So I'll follow up with that shortly. But other than that, I'm sure everybody will be going on, hopefully taking some vacation or some time off soon. So I hope everybody has happy holidays, a good break. And you know, when you get some time working around the holidays to provide some feedback on these, it would be much appreciated. But thank you all for your time. Sorry, we ran a minute over, but very helpful.
No, you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.